Chapter 1. My story began when I turned 18, the age when you become a fully responsible adult in the eyes of the government. Well, theoretically, my story began even earlier. To be precise, it began more than 100 years ago and in a different reality. A reality where a series of games existed called Mass Effect, a game that became my new reality. I never found out how or even why. In the end, I didn't care much about it. At first, I even thought that I was just reborn into the future. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Humanity was still confined to the Sol system and had colonies on Luna and Mars. There was nothing that screamed Mass Effect at me. It just looked and felt like the future. But that changed from one day to the next, when it was announced that alien ruins had been found on Mars. They called these aliens Protheans. I swear my heart stopped for a moment when I heard the news. At that moment, I was already 23 years old and came to terms with the whole being reborn long ago. But hearing that I wasn't just reborn, but flung into a different reality was something else. The first thing I did after the news was that I checked the internet for BioWare and Mass Effect. I got dozens of hits for BioWare, but none for Mass Effect. Not a single one. It seemed like they never had the idea for that series. But there was something I would call a ray of hope. BioWare made a KOTOR 3 and it was great. Just some information by the side. But back to the situation at hand. I knew what would be coming. The first contact war with the Turians, the whole trope of humanity becoming part of the Citadel, Cerberus, and of course the Reapers, and the galactic war with them. While I looked out of the window of my apartment onto the skyline of London and the Thames, I pondered what options I had. I could do nothing and live my life to the fullest and hope that Shepard would do the right thing and destroy the Reapers. Or I could try to meddle with the future and prepare humanity and the rest of the galaxy as best as I could. The means to do something meaningful were available to me. When my father died, he left me his mining company and the beginnings of a company centered around starship construction. I was 15 at the time and couldn't take control of the company just yet. My mother died 3 years before him, and I suspected he never really recovered from it. He wasn't a bad father, far from it. He did try, but he was broken inside. For me, it was hard too. Losing your mother is never easy, even for someone who had already lived another life. It probably helped that I wasn't born aware of my old life, so that I truly could form a connection with my new parents. The first memories came slowly when I was 8 years old and would continue for the next 2 years before I would understand that those weren't vivid dreams, but memories of a previous life. And when Mom died, the shock released probably them all, and I remembered fully. After Dad died, I would concentrate on learning everything I could about business, economy, and starship engineering. In my old life, I already had a degree in business and economy, so I wasn't that hard to or learn it. But starship engineering and engineering in general was something else, especially since there were 100 years more to it than I knew of. Concepts and theories I had never heard of and scientists of my old life would never have thought of yet. But I was determined to make my dad's dream true. He had always spoken of how he would have loved to explore the stars and to see different planets. That was why he was branching out into starship construction. I still remembered when I was 6 or 7, and Dad took me out into the wild for camping. We looked up into the night sky, away from any city, and could see the stars. He had this faraway look in his eyes when he spoke to me. Son. To this day, I remember what he said with an impossible clarity. We humans have always wondered what is out there in the galaxy, and now we're on the verge of finding out. I feel it deep in my heart. That's why I want to fly up there one day and just explore. Seeing new things, sights no human ever set sights on before. That is my dream, and I hope you will find a dream of your own one day. I could only nod at his words and thought how cool my dad was. After his death, I swore I would make his dream come true in his stead. Officially, I took control over the companies when I turned 18, but practically that happened 2 years later when I got my degree in business and economy. Hey, don't think that took too long for one who was already practiced in it. I studied engineering with a focus on starships by the side, which took me 1 more year to get my degree in. For the next 2 years after I took over and had to fire 1 or 2 of the executive part for embezzling, helped consolidate my position in the company, Not gonna lie, I focused on expanding on our mining operations first. Processed resources were always something needed, and in an age of space exploration in was even more needed, especially when I wanted to build my own starships one day. To produce the materials needed for construction would make production cheaper, and in the end, I could make more money with them, even if sold cheaper than those of my rivals. To that goal, I hired some scientists and engineers to invent equipment that would make mining easier, cheaper, and faster. It took them 6 months, but they constructed VIX-controlled drones that helped the workers immensely with breaking up the minerals in the soil and refining them into usable materials. It worked like a charm, and my company saw exponential growth for the next 2 years, and it didn't stop there because the team that created the drones continued to make them even better or finding new areas where and how those drones could be used. Furthermore, my mining company grew to the point that it encompassed 41% of all extraterrestrial mining operations and was still growing. All the while, the Starship company slowly grew as well, and the cheap materials allowed for experimentation with design. But that was the furthest thing from my mind at the moment because I was still pondering the question of what I should do. I could let the events of the games play out and hope for the best, or I could do something. I wasn't sure what I could do. Supporting Shepard? That was a given, but how should I do it? I didn't have any special abilities. Biotics weren't even a thing yet, nor did I have a technological superior combat suit. Moreover, I wasn't even a soldier or even had the potential to be one. My sister in my previous life was one and told me that I would never survive military life. Proud as I was, I disagreed, and she dared me to spend 1 week with her doing standard exercises. Waking up at dawn, training, doing chores and more training. I barely survived the first day, and at the end of the third, I truly hated her. After the week, she told me that that wasn't even the hardest that she experienced, and I couldn't fathom how I could survive an even harder regime. Pride shattered. I agreed with her that military life wasn't for me. Thinking about my sister let me smile. She had been 6 years older than me and had always watched over me. Every time I needed help or needed advice, I just had to ask. In this life, I was an orphan with no sibling that I could turn to, so I looked in the past to find an answer. For the next 10 minutes, I just looked out the window, reminiscing, interrupted only by sipping on my glass of Irish whiskey. Then suddenly, something my sister once said flew through my mind, and the thought let me stand up on reflex. A grin came over my face when I remembered her words. You know, if you even had only a half the interest in politics that you have in business, you could probably become president in less than 12 years. After all, you have a way with words. You probably could sell sand in the desert and make a killing with it. At the time, I just laughed and asked her if she would like to invest in my business, but now her words truly struck something in me. A path opened up before me, a path that would lead me to the center of the action while away from the battlefields. A way to truly move something, to prepare for the Reapers, to make things better in the galaxy even after the Reapers were dealt with. I knew what I wanted to do, what I wanted to be. Neither Anderson nor Udina would stand in my way. I would become the human counselor. Well, it seemed like I made my decision of what to do, and I even had a goal to boot. Becoming the human counselor would let me have a direct influence on galactic politics and events. But that would be far off into the future. If I remembered the timeline, it would take something between 32 to 36 years before the events of mass effect happened. Hell, it would take a decade before the first contact war with the Turians. That thought let me stop. I knew that in a few years the Turians would attack Shang-Chi, and my knowledge could help prevent it. But the question was, should I? My foreknowledge could be interpreted as a kind of time travel, where the traveler tries to change events in the past to create a better future. But by using his knowledge of what is to come, he could make these events happen in the first place. Or he changes the events, and instead of a positive effect on the future, it is even worse than before. Still pondering the question, I poured myself another glass of whiskey. Was it my second or already my third? I didn't know thinking of monumental and history-altering decisions lets you ignore such minor things. Taking a small sip, I cherished the light burning in my throat, reminding me that this was real and no fabrication of my mind. Well, maybe it was, But was reality truly something different than a fabrication of our mind? It takes the information of our surroundings and interprets them. The result is what we call reality. Who can say that my previous life on Earth in the 21st century was real and not just a bad dream of some kind of animal? For me, the reality was the here and now. My reality was the beginnings of the Mass Effect universe. No, it wasn't just the Mass Effect universe. It was my Mass Effect universe. Who could say what the future would bring? Maybe my being here had already changed things irredeemably from the original timeline. Did me even have an original timeline? Take a look at Shepard, for example. He or she could be born on Earth, on Mindwar, or in space. Different places and probably different parents. And do not forget that Shepard could become the survivor of Akuz, the Butcher of Torfin, or the hero of Elysium. And that are all variables before the game even begins. I don't want to even discuss the different classes that Shepard could be, because that would mean differences in his/her training. Another question was if I could even influence the coming events. The answer to that was a resounding no. I had no pull in any government. And even if I had, it would be useless because the System Alliance didn't exist yet. They would be founded in the coming years in response to the discovery of the Prothean ruins. Or was it because of the Karen relay? No matter. I would wait and then start to make myself vital to the Alliance. They would be the key player in galactic politics for humanity, and being a part of them would give me the chance to become counselor later on. Furthermore, they would be the military arm of humanity as well, and it would do well to support them if we wanted to have a better chance at repelling the Reapers. In the end, my decision on what to do was as simple as it was complicated. I would let things play out and deal with them as they come. No more worrying about deviating events or possible futures. No human being was made to control the future, and anyone who thought differently was a fool. You could influence the possibility of a specific future, but never dictate all details. With that decision, my mind began to formulate a battle plan for the immediate future. I would need a strong support base to truly change anything, and just expanding my mining business wouldn't do the trick. That didn't mean I wouldn't expand in that sector. Oh, I definitely would expand there. Materials would become even more valuable, but I had to branch out. My still small starship company, Ad Astra, would be a key in the coming years. I would try to become the major supplier of space vessels for the Alliance, which would give me an entry in the political arena of the Alliance that I could later use as a stepping stone to the Citadel. Another thing was that I could try to support the invention and development of technology apart from Element Zero and Mass Effect, remembering the revelation that the mass relays and the Citadel were built by the Reapers to control the development of galactic civilizations and guide them down a specific path. And what about the end of Mass Effect 3? Did the Crucible render the mass relays unusable, or could they still be used? I didn't know, but I would work on the assumption that they would not. Hope for the best and be prepared for the worst. That was a good motto to hold on to. What else could be done? That question swirled through my mind, and dozens of ideas came up. Some dismissed, but some held promise. Weapons, for example, not just small arms, no, weapons for ships. Maybe even orbital defense like those in Halo. That was an interesting thought. Why try to think up everything from scratch when hundreds of fictional ideas could work? After all, something was just so long fiction until somebody brought it into reality. Mass Effect was something fictional before, and now it was real, at least to me. The rough outline of my plan for the next 10 years was done. I would expand my mining business, Ad Astra, and branch out into weapon development and other technological avenues. Moreover, I would try to become a key player in the Alliance itself. It would be easier while it was still young and not recognized as the power it would become. I smiled as my gaze wandered over the skyline of London at night. My glass raised to a toast, I remembered the old Chinese curse. May we live in interesting times. Chapter 2, March 14th, 2150. It took almost 2 years until the System Alliance formed and stabilized itself so that it could start its duties. Not that there was much that the Alliance did just yet. After all, it was still in its infancy. And like so many things, when they just started, they were not taken seriously by the existing governments, neither on Earth, nor Luna, nor Mars. An example of how the situation looked like to me would be like an adult smiling down at a child when it tries to be taken seriously. It wasn't like anybody thought that the alliance was useless. No, everybody understood the concept behind the formation. Humanity was not alone in the galaxy. The Prothean ruins proved that, and there had to be an institution which could speak for humanity on a galactic level. It was just that the alliance wasn't tested yet. Almost all of the existing human governments had their fair share of history behind them. A history that was marked by reformation, revolution, war, social changes, technological innovations, and ideas that changed the way we saw the world. Against such an opponent was the idea behind the System Alliance, not enough. Well, not enough for now. After first contact, the SA would be seen in another light. It would show that the Alliance could perform its duties to defend humanity against an alien entity. Furthermore, it would prove that it was ready to play with the big guys on a galactic scale. But for me, that was still some time into the future and no immediate concern. Right now, I was more concerned with how I would get a foot in the door to the SA before anyone else saw what the Alliance could become and tried the same. Luckily, I was the first one to do so, at least of the bigger companies out there. Perhaps some small company had tried before, but I had heard nothing. I planned to secure a partnership between the SA and my company, while I could declare my company as the official partner of the System Alliance and get some positive PR this way. The Alliance would get free advertisement this way, and they needed advertisement. It would lead to more people joining, which in turn would lead to getting things done faster, and so on. All in all, it would lead to a stronger alliance. Moreover, they would get cheaper prices on raw and processed materials, starships, in short, everything that was part of my company. Most governments would give me a title and land for that kind of deal. But I didn't do it just out of the kindness of my heart. Partly yes, not more. I studied the new charter of the Alliance and what fell under their purview. For example, the discovery of new planets in the colonization effort, the defense of star systems claimed by the SA and humanity, the research of Prothean ruins, and my favorite, the distribution of mining rights in newly discovered systems. I knew that 2 of my rival mining enterprises started mining in the system beyond the Karen relay, and oh boy, they would have to pay some heavy fines. There were 2 major points I would try to accomplish in the coming negotiations. 1, a reduction of taxes, always nice, and preferential treatment by the distribution of mining rights. I sighed as I leaned back in my chair. It would still take some time until we were in Vancouver, where the headquarters of the System Alliance was located. There were already ideas about a space station beyond the Sharon relay that would become the new headquarters. But Arcturus Station was still a far-off dream for the most. A dream that would come true, as I knew thanks to my foreknowledge. Thankfully, I could relax and check the newest updates on my company while traveling without being shaken around needlessly. Most would say it was because of the technological progress in flight and the slowly distributed ME cores, I thought, that it was because of the efforts, skill, and talent of my personal driver or pilot today. Janet was wonderful. She could drive or pilot almost anything, and give her a day or two, and she would bring you at least from point A to point B safely. And she could make a mean coffee. Above all, once you had her loyalty, you had her loyalty. There were only 3 people who had it: her daughter, her husband, and me, in that order. Nothing surprising about it, but I was thankful to be even included in that list. There's nothing better than a loyal driver. Not everybody has to know about all my travel plans. Just 20 more minutes till we're there, Mr. Denneburn. I got clearance to land on a private landing pad. It seems like they want to make a good impression on you, sir, came Janet's voice over the speaker in the passenger cabin. So it seems. Thank you, Janet, I chuckled. 20 more minutes until maybe the most important deal I would ever make. While it probably wouldn't be the only opportunity to involve myself with the Alliance, it would be the one with the highest chance of success and long-living partnership. Well, there was nothing I could do right now to influence the outcome of the talks, but I was prepared for them. Everything I did the last 2 years was to prepare for this negotiation. My share in the mining business grew from 41% to 46%. It didn't seem like much, but it was substantial. 5% of every mining business in the solar system is a big number. It could have been higher if I had taken more interest in taking over other companies, but I hadn't. The priority for my mining business laid in refining the methods we used and developing new support systems. The VIX-controlled drones were just the first step. Making mining faster, cheaper, and especially safer was a must. No new government wanted to be known to cooperate with someone who didn't care about the lives of his workers. Bad PR was a big no-no in its young years. A nice side effect was that other companies heard about those safer methods and bought materials more often from my firms than my rivals. Everybody wanted to say that their products were made without risk to anyone. Another issue why I concentrated on this part of my mining business was Element Zero. We may have found some in the Prothean ruins, but those caches wouldn't last forever, and there was none in our solar system. There had been some readings that the system beyond the Charon Relay had some places where natural ESO could be mined. But how could it be mined? Was it pure already? Or did it has to be refined? And if it has to, how has it to be done? After all, we couldn't just send a probe and be done with it. No, to accomplish that goal, we needed two things. On the one side, we needed the rights to the mining areas where E0 deposits were located, and on the other side, we needed access to the samples from the Prothean ruins to compare those mined to. And both were in the Alliance's hands. The rights to learn how to mine it, and the samples to have a benchmark on how it had to be after refining to use it for me engines. To reach that benchmark and maybe even surpass it was something for R&D as well as the mining process, which would mostly consist of educated trial and error. On another note, the Starship section of my ever-growing enterprise was doing fine. In the wake of the then newly discovered alien ruins, I bought two smaller Starship companies along with their shipyards and combined them with mine. They had almost been bankrupt, so they weren't that expansive. But I still made a dent in my finances because I bought them for the most part, with my private money. The junction of the companies catapulted Ad Astra to the fourth biggest Starship company in the system and reached place number 3 in the last 2 years. Plus, I got my investment back and then some. A good deal with the Alliance would probably bring it to place number 1 in the long run. But I could wait. Right now, the Alliance had only 5 ships to their name, all built by Terran ships and equipped with a ME drive reverse-engineered by scientists who had now worked for the Alliance. I had seen the numbers they paid for those 5 ships, and I was truly surprised that the Alliance still had any money. Terran Ships was known as the best starship builder, and that title was reflected in the cost of their ships. To continue to grow their fledgling fleet, the Alliance had to either plan very far into the future and build it slowly, change the supplier, or raise some serious taxes to pay for them. My favorite option was to change the supplier because I was one and was about to give them a nice deal. By the way, I made some entry in the weapons business. I found a company that produced reliable and sturdy weapons. It wasn't one of the bigger names, more like an insider tip, but I still bought some of their stock options. Nothing much, but at least something. If all went well, I would have the means to perform a hostile takeover in 1 or 2 years. Well, it would only be a hostile takeover until I talked to the management, a few discussions later, and they would be more than happy to work with me. I could be that charming and convincing if I wanted to. An announcement from Janet that we would be landing in a minute got me away from my thoughts. After a short stretching of my muscles, I checked over my appearance. Nothing could derail a business negotiation, or negotiation in general, like a sloppy appearance. Just as Janet was landing, I righted the tie of my old-style 3-piece suit. Yes, you heard right, old style. What would have been a high-class suit in my previous life was considered old style now. The modern suits leaned more in the direction of what Shepard could be wearing in Mass Effect. It looked nice, but I preferred what I was wearing now. It did cost me some, but I was happy. A shudder went through the shuttle when it set down, and the door opened sideways to give way to the outside view. And what a view it was. I had seen pictures of the new building where the temporary headquarters of the System Alliance were situated, but to see it in person was another thing. An imposing building of silver steel and glass, accented with blue and white. On the highest tower, the new symbol of the Alliance was proudly proclaimed. If one looked hard enough, squinted his eyes a little, and turned his head just a bit to the right, one could see what the SA would become in the coming years. That no one else other than me had the interest to invest in them was just stupid. But maybe it was because I knew what they would become that I could see it. Hey, foreknowledge for the win. A man in dress uniform awaited me on the landing pad. He was around 1.8 m tall, just a tad bit shorter than me, I guess. Without standing next to him, I couldn't tell. Short brown hair and dark eyes bordering on black. His uniform was beyond reproach. Before I talked to him, I couldn't say if it was because of me and the chance I represented, part of his personality, or something he held on to from military service. Each of these possibilities would require a different approach during the negotiations. That said, I didn't even know if he was the one I would deal with, or if he just was the welcome committee. No matter, let's get this show started. After signaling Janet that she could relax for some time, I made my way to the waiting man. As I came close, he held his hand out, but I could see from his posture that saluting would have been more natural to him. So a military man. "Welcome to the Alliance headquarters, Mr. Dennerbern. I am Admiral James Wright, commander of the Alliance Navy. Even if it is not much," he said as I shook his hand. "Seems like I guessed right. A military man, but one with a sense of humor. I could already see us working well together." "Thank you. I'm happy to be here, Admiral. Shall we proceed? It could help to start increasing the size of your fleet." "Whew," was the Admiral's answer as he signaled me to follow him. I just smiled at his unasked question, telling him to wait some more. The trip into the building was silent. No more words were exchanged between us. It wasn't uncomfortable and helped to organize my thoughts once more before the talks. While walking towards an elevator that would take us higher into the building, into a prepared conference room, I took notice of the activity around us. From the outside, it would seem like chaos, people walking around, discussing on the floor and carrying equipment, but to the more observant, it was organized chaos. Everyone walked with a clear goal, talked fast and to the point. No energy was wasted on doing nothing. Those were the people who joined the Alliance in its waking hours. The people who believed in the idea and goal of the SA with all their hearts and gave it as much as they could. I couldn't help but smile as I saw it, even if I could be as cold-hearted as a stock banker in the 21st century. Seeing so many motivated people working towards a common goal moved me. If Admiral Wright noticed it, he did not indicate that he had, and just waited stoically for the elevator to arrive. The doors of the elevator opened and we walked in. Admiral Wright hit the button for the 12th floor and waited for the doors to close. "The others await us in room 1209, he said as the elevator started to move. "The others?" I asked, trying to find out who else besides the Admiral would be taking part. In response, he just stayed silent and smiled. I knew that that was his revenge for my staying silent before, and I gave him this small victory. Reasonably fast, the elevator arrived at the wanted floor without stops, and Admiral Wright took the lead again. He led us to a metallic door where a black 1209 was painted beside the doorframe and laid his right hand against a touchpad. A confirmation tone later, and the door swooshed open sideways. Stepping to the side, he signaled me to walk in first. The first thing I saw was an enormous window front with a spectacular view over Vancouver. From here, one could see the whole city and even a bit beyond. The next thing I noticed were two people who were waiting on the other side of the room. A blonde woman and a dark-skinned man, to be specific. While I didn't recognize the woman, the man, on the other hand, was someone I instantly recognized. Hell, anybody who had even a passing interest in the Alliance would at least have heard his name. As a fellow Londoner, I had to know him. Michael Port, head of the System Alliance. To say I was surprised would have been an understatement. I had expected to meet someone high in the food chain, but the top himself? That was unexpected. On the other side, I could barely hold in the glee I felt. If I interpreted this situation right, then that meant that my requesting a meeting for a business deal had been more interesting than I had hoped. Mr. Port was the first one to move. He came towards me with a sincere smile plastered on his face. "Mr. Dennerbern, nice to meet you," he said with his deep voice, a soft London accent coming true. "A pleasure," I responded warmly. That was going to be interesting. Michael Port was as charismatic as he was ruthless. Most people only saw the warm and motivated person who got elected as the head of the Alliance. But that was just what they wanted you to see on the first glance, and the second, and even the third. Until you truly researched him, You would never know what lurked behind that face. I don't want you to think he was a cruel, heartless, or hateful person. Far from it, but if the need was there, he could be ruthless in his goal to defend what was dear to him. There was a story about someone that tried to undermine one of his projects in Central Africa. Needless to say, it didn't go well for that someone, slowly losing whatever power, influence, or money he had, becoming a social pariah and completely disappearing into obscurity. No one ever heard of him again. Not that it was a loss, but it showcased the power Michael Port wielded. And the System Alliance was his newest project, and the people I talked with told me that this project had motivated him like none before. So I knew I had to tread carefully, but if he saw that I genuinely wanted to support the Alliance and believed in its goal would be better than any monetary help I could give. May I introduce you to Dr. Barbara Helkin? Mr. Port gestured to the woman in the room. Her long blonde hair flowed over her shoulders like water, and her deep blue eyes bored into my own. Behind those blue pearls, I could see an intelligence lurking that said, I know I'm smart, you know I'm smart, and I'm queen in my field, so don't even try. Oh, don't worry. I would never challenge you, at least not in your field, or without stacking the cards to my favor. I took notice that Mr. Port continued to introduce her. She is the head of the Scientific Research Department of the Alliance. With her at the helm, we constructed our first Mass Effect drive cores. Another department head. Totally, 3 high-ranked Alliance people. Hopefully no one else was going to join us, or else I may become nervous. Right now, I could still suppress that notion. Good day, Dr. Helkin greeted me, a thick Scandinavian accent lacing her voice. I couldn't identify if it was Finnish or Swedish, but I was sure it came from there. After she spoke, I noticed how short she was in comparison to me. Not a bit taller than 1.6 m. Never mind, her position alone told that she was a formidable woman. I read about the Vax drones you use for mining. Good idea, very adaptable for other uses. Her comment and greeting given, she took a step back and then turned to sit down on one of the chairs that were situated along the table that filled the room. I turned back to Mr. Port, and he gestured to one of the chairs opposite from where Dr. Helkin sat. I believe the good doctor has the right idea. Shall we start this meeting? I nodded my consent to his suggestion and took my place. A minute later and in front of me were the probably 3 most powerful people of the Alliance, and I was about to make a deal that would make or break my future with the Alliance. That was going to be fun. Chapter 3. March 14, 2150, Alliance HQ, Vancouver, Conference Room 1209. First of all, let me say that we were surprised that you reached out to us, began Mr. Port with a smile on his face that talks. After all, you're a rising power in the business world. I hope that this meeting will succeed for all of us. I hope so too, and I'm grateful to have this opportunity. Moreover, that such important people like you, Mr. Port, received me, I answered fluidly. Thus far, a pretty standard opening for negotiations. Some pleasantries exchanged and trying to skirt around the real questions that wanted to be asked. Saying they were surprised about me contacting them was nothing more than a nice way of asking, what the hell do you want? While the Admiral didn't show any kind of emotion to the pleasantries and just stared at me, Dr. Helkin was more vocal about them. If the rolling of her eyes and her groaning was any indication, she had heard this kind of opening often enough, and it annoyed her. She probably wanted to be in some dark and quiet room with enough data to research for millennia, or any place else other than here. If I had been a common businessman that could be found in the most prominent companies, the negotiation would already start to go south. The common businessmen didn't want to be seen as an annoyance. They wanted to be the center of attention, wanted their ego stroked like they were some kind of saint. Fortunately, I wasn't a common businessman. I liked those people more than the ones who would try to woo me, because with that kind of people, you could talk facts and get a deal pretty fast. That was beneficial to both. The ink on the contract would be dry before the wooers finished even their opening. Mr. Port's eyes darted to his side where Dr. Helkin sat, and his smile became strained. Suddenly, it disappeared completely, and with it was the warm and welcoming atmosphere in the room gone. Instead, there was now a feeling of tension and seriousness in the air. When his eyes focused on me again, I saw that the charismatic leader of the Alliance, who could bring thousands to join in the first months, was gone, and in his stead was the calculating head of an organization that was tasked with defending humanity against all threats that could be lurking in the galaxy. It seems, he began slowly, that my colleagues want to proceed with the talks fast and without the usual social dancing around. Personally, I have nothing against it. I have enough of these pleasantries with Earth's nations. They seem to think that while they sign the Alliance Charter, that they have to drown us in so much bureaucratic nonsense so that they can keep their military space vessels, even if it is against the Charter. The frustration and anger of Mr. Port easy to identify. Anyone could see the look of disgust on his face for having to deal with stubborn nations that wanted to hang on their toys. It didn't surprise me in the least that they were stubborn. No nation wanted to give away even a slice of power. No matter if military or social, it didn't matter if it was for a higher goal. As long as they had no direct power over the assets, they were reluctant to part with them. And if somebody reminded them that they had signed a contract, they would throw a ton of paperwork at them. They could be petty like that. Let us talk facts. His declaration was nothing surprising. I had expected that it would come to this point in the discussion where we spoke what we really thought and wanted instead of using honeyed words. But for it to happen in the first minutes, that was something new. I gave my consent. What does a man who owns businesses in mining and shipbuilding want from the Alliance? Becoming its major supplier, of course. But why now? If you think that because we're young, we're desperate for a supplier, you're wrong. If you think you can trick us in a contract where you can exploit us, I will destroy you and everything you created. If any of this is your intention, I think you can find the door out yourself. We've got better things to do. Mr. Port's words were aggressive and direct, but there was no heat behind them, just a promise of destruction if crossed. Normally, when somebody got aggressive while discussing with me, there was screaming, threats, and a lot of cuss words. Nothing out of the ordinary for me. But dealing with this cold and controlled aggression, that was something completely else, especially because I knew he would make his promise true. A cold shudder went down my back. Two paths were open to me. Either I could try to steer the negotiations into a calmer direction, which was probably safer, or I fight fire with fire and talk facts. In my opinion, that was a no-brainer. Sometimes you have to take risks. You said you want to talk facts? Okay, I responded as equally aggressive and controlled. Fact is that no one takes the Alliance serious. Everyone wants to pride themselves with the fact that they created something that united humanity, even if it's in name only. Furthermore, they want someone to blame if shit hits the fan, so that they can say it was the Alliance's fault, even if they were the reason the SA wasn't prepared enough. The delay to transfer their military vessels is a good example. And I know for sure that some people are already exploiting you or ignoring your directives and are already setting up operations in the Arcturus system. I've seen how much you paid for the 5 ships that make your fleet right now. They fucked you good, even if they use prototype tech. I would fire the guy who made that deal. You need someone who knows the economical side of things, someone who has contacts in several different companies that produce what you need. Most importantly, you need someone who gets shit done. And I am that guy. Towards the end, I got more heated and into my arguments. I even stood up and leaned forward, my hands on the table, stabilizing my posture, staring right into Port's eyes. It could have been hours or just seconds. There was nothing but the staring duel I held with Uncle Port. Later in the future, I would pat myself on the shoulder for pulling that move and surviving. The staring duel was interrupted by a chuckle from Admiral Wright, which turned soon into full-blown laughter. Heh, I like that guy. He at least has a backbone other than that other guy. And I have seen soldiers who would have cowered by your speech, Michelle. Nothing to say of even thinking to talk back. He's got my vote. Let's hear him out. My sight went from Preston to the Admiral, who sported a happy grin, and then to Dr. Helkin. Her smile was smaller than the Admiral's, but still there. Then as fast as before, the atmosphere changed from tense to comfortable again. Mr. Port relaxed immensely and smiled as well. That was when I realized that this had been a test. They wanted to see if I was just more of the usual or something different, and it seemed like I passed it. I'm sorry for my hostility before, but I wanted to know who we're dealing with. We screened you, of course, but I believed a personal test was needed and you passed, apologized Mr. Port, and confirmed my thoughts. Don't worry, I reassured him. Your concerns were valid and you wanted to know who you were going to deal with. Yes, I detest people who are skirting around issues and never tell what they really think. Right now, the Alliance needs people who aren't afraid of telling the truth and saying what they think. Doing anything else will just hinder us, and that is something we don't need right now. Everyone has to pull their weight and not make more problems. Those we got enough already from others. So what is it that you can offer us? Dr. Helkin tried to steer the conversation towards the negotiation and away from escalating into rants about idiots. Fine with me. That was after all the reason we were here. Let us begin with starships. I think that is the most important for the Admiral here. I gestured towards Admiral Wright and got started. Right now, the Alliance has to pay absurd prices for new ships, and even when you get those still in possession of the nations, that will not be enough. That number comes up to less than 40. You will need ships for exploration, defense, and logistics. We're talking here in numbers in the high hundreds, and that will not be the end. Sometime in the future, humanity will find a garden world and establish a colony there. That colony will need ships to bring colonists there and process material that can be used to build an outpost first, and later help that outpost to grow into a city. That colony will need protection from whatever it threatens and give a feeling of safety so that colonists even think about going there. They will want to be safe. It seemed like I had the attention of all three even. The Admiral was nodding along with my arguments, understanding that they were valid. Furthermore, we humans are greedy. We won't be satisfied with just 1 or 2 planets. If new hospitable planets are discovered, I can promise you that there will be people who want to live there. There will always be some who want to be the first one. And what better way to do this than being the first to live on a whole new planet? I took a short break to take a data pad out of the inner pocket of my jacket and opened the file I assembled to make my point. With the push of a button, I activated the presentation function and laid the pad on the table. Only seconds later, a holographic picture formed above it and displayed a variety of numbers. I love this pad, just one push of a button and you had a presentation. No more preparation of equipment beforehand. As you can see on the right side, I gestured towards the picture, you paid for the ships from Terran ships, the construction cost of the ships themselves. I took the estimated average for ships of this class and an additional 210%. Even if we take into account that they had to modify their designs to use the still-tested ME drive cores, it is much too high to make a substantial and constant growth possible, not even mentioning the maintenance of them. Good thing we got that bastard that made such a shitty deal, growled Wright. We found out he was paid by a stockholder of Terran ships to make that deal. And now that fucker is probably responsible for making sure that the toilets are clean in some rundown fast food restaurant. Here's the offer I have for you, I continued. Material and construction cost plus 60%. I made another pause to let the number sink in before my second argument. 2/3 of that 60% will be used for the expansion of the shipyards and the R&D section, which would, of course, fully cooperate with the research teams of the Alliance to make the best possible ships. That is a good deal, said a stunned Admiral Wright. Dr. Helkin had a small sparkle in her eyes at the proposal of more funds for her research, while Port's eyes showed hints of suspicion. He decided to voice his thoughts. It is a good deal. Too good even. What do you want in return? That can't be very profitable for you. That's right, Mr. Port. It isn't very profitable for me. I agreed with him, and the suspicion rose among the three in front of me. Nobody proposed a deal like that without a hidden goal. The question was what they were, and if they were in any way detrimental for the Alliance. While not overly much, it will still gain me profit, just not as much as it could. There are other factors to that deal that will mean net more profit than otherwise. First of all, I won't be building ships just for the Alliance, no. I will continue to produce ships for private use, even if the percentage of ships will be lower than those for the Alliance. Furthermore, I want to use downgraded versions of the technology that we will be implementing in the ships of the Alliance for those. My gaze went to Dr. Helkin, who thought for a moment before nodding, telling me that it would be doable. Through that, I will garner more demand than rival businesses and get my profits that way. I started to explain my reasons. In addition to that, I would like to advertise my company as an official partner of the Alliance. That would even be beneficial to both of us. How so? Asked Port, truly interested. The look of his eyes said it all. He knew where I was going with that angle, but he probably wanted to see if we thought alike. Good PR. I can advertise my company as one that supports the advancement of humanity into the stars, while you can say that you work together with enterprises that take good care of the safety and well-being of their workers. Maybe I even put up something like that. 5% of every starship will be donated directly into Alliance funds. People love things like that. They all want to be seen doing something good, but hardly anyone truly wants to do it for free. Hell, I will even put up an option to pay some more as a donation. Those with more money than brains cannot not do this. It would make them seem petty or having to count their pennies, and that is not anything they want. I really like your ideas. That money could truly be a blessing to the Alliance and its growth. Port started. But before we continue, I have to ask, why are you doing this? I was puzzled. Where did he want to go with this question? I believe I showed why it would be beneficial to me to work with you, I answered slowly, trying to get a feeling for his question. That's not what I meant. It's clear that this deal would be beneficial to both our sides, but I want to know why you're offering such a good deal. Nobody does something like this just for economical gains, at least not without trying to maximize your gains. So what is your motivation? You have to have one. That was what he was asking about. I expected that the question would come up sooner or later. Fortunately, I knew already what I was going to say, and it was going to be the truth, just leaving some things out. I can see the future. I can see what the Alliance can become if it is supported enough. It is like you said, Mr. Port, in your interview after your election to head the Alliance. This is a new age for all of humanity, and the Alliance is a way to unite us all to work towards a common goal. I'm proud to be a part of this. In every instance of our history, every time humans united to do something, our world was changed. Long before civilization, humans united to hunt together, and our rate of survival was drastically increased. When we united and formed small villages, we started to create a civilization. When villages banded together, it wasn't long before we started to create countries, kingdoms, nations. People who believed in an idea started to work together and laid the foundation for what we have today, be it technological, medical, or social. And the Alliance is now trying to unite all of us. Many tried, but nobody succeeded. But I believe that the SA has the highest chance of success in our complete history, and that is why I want to be part of it. While I talked, I threw my arms wide and a genuine smile across my face, the excitement I felt lacing every word I said. Neither of the three people in front of me could help but have at least a small smile on their faces as well. Every single one of them had their own reasons to join the Alliance, but what I just had described had struck a chord in them. And to help the Alliance succeed, you need someone who knows how to make sure the economy is stable and the Alliance can gather enough funds. Someone who knows the markets and can predict possible changes. Mr. Port, you said yourself that even if you own one of the biggest companies on Earth, that you have no sense of business and are happier to leave the company in more able hands. Let me be the able hands of the Alliance. I made my companies flourish more than ever. I can do the same for the Alliance. From the looks on their faces, I could see that Mr. Port and Admiral Wright were about to hire me almost instantly. They both had seen in the Alliance what I saw. Port had always been an idealist who tried to make things better for humanity as a whole, and he accomplished some pretty amazing things. From responding to humanitarian crises to supporting terraforming in areas that were still devastated after World War III. Those nuclear hellholes were slowly coming back to life. Even Admiral Wright had to have seen something in the Alliance that would make him leave from his post as an admiral in the NEOUSN, the North American Union Space Navy. Something more than a higher paycheck at the end of the month and some new, shining toys. The only one who still had some reservations was Dr. Helkin. She observed me with searching eyes, and it seemed like she found something and asked, "There's still something more, isn't it?" I sighed, stood up, and walked around the table towards the window front. Of course there was something more. I knew about the Citadel, the other races that inhabited the galaxy, and most importantly, I knew about the Reapers. While a small part of me had voiced the thought that the Reapers perhaps didn't exist in this universe. After all, nobody could tell how much this universe differentiated from the one displayed in the games. My hopes were almost non-existent. Hope for the best and prepare for the worst was a good motto to go by in this situation. It took almost 2 minutes for me to answer her question. Somebody once asked, what is the scarier thought, that there is alien life in the universe or that we are alone? An interesting question, but one we don't have to find an answer to anymore, because we know that we're not alone. But knowing that we are not alone doesn't make the galaxy any less scary. We only know that the Protheans were once on Mars watching early humanity, nothing more. We don't know if they're extinct or still out there, or if there are other alien races. Maybe none, maybe one, or maybe 100. If they are peaceful or hostile, and if they're hostile, we could be outgunned and outnumbered. The possibility exists that would hunt humanity to extinction, and if that situation happens, I want to be able to say that we at least gave them a bloody nose and made them pay for their victory. There's always a bigger fish. I turned around to face the others once more and added grimly, and I want to make sure that they won't be able to swallow humanity in one bite. My answer seemed to satisfy Dr. Helkin, who responded with a quiet determination to my declaration. A determination that seemed to spread to the other occupants in the room. While I couldn't talk openly about what I knew about the Citadel races and the Reapers, at least not without sounding and labeled as a lunatic, I could at least give a warning. After all, many fictional works describe what I had just spoken about, and in my opinion, fiction was just so long fiction until it became real. My situation was the best example of it. No one said a word, and my steps echoed abnormally loud in the silent room as I made my way back to my seat. There were meaningful glances exchanged between Mr. Port and the other two, who answered with a small smile and a nod respectively. When I sat down, Mr. Port directed his sight back to me and said, "When you first approached us, we were unsure what to make of it. Many of us, I included, thought you to be an opportunist trying to make a profit out of the Alliance like so many else. While your history shows that you care about your employees, it also showed your tries to mercilessly crush your opponents in the economic field. In the end, we decided to give you a chance to prove yourself to us, and now we see the result. While you certainly want to make a good business deal, you showed that this is not everything that stands behind you offer. You don't say it openly, but you are an idealist. Maybe not as much as others that join the Alliance, but you too see the idea that the Alliance represents. The unity that we envision, that made us all come together, and not just those that are here in this room. The name we took says it all. Systems Alliance, an organization that not just represents Earth or just the Sol system. No, an organization that shall represent and unite all the systems and planets that humanity will spread to. There will always be people who want to be left alone and do their own thing, but we will certainly try to unite them all, and we will come closer to that goal than anyone before us. And you share that vision, so there is just one more thing to say." Port made a dramatic pause, and I knew would come. The smile that was on his face lit up the room and spread out to not just me, but also Admiral Wright and even Dr. Helkin. I believe that was the first time I truly saw her smile without restraint. "Welcome to the Alliance, Mr. Dennebrun." The rest of the meeting was just hashing out the details of my other propositions. While they couldn't grant me preferential treatment when distributing mining rights in newly discovered solar systems, the Alliance would hold on to some mining locations that would be designated as vital to Alliance expansion, and my company would be hired to mine them. I would be paid monetarily and in a percentage of the mined resources, the percentage dependent on the kind of mineral that would be mined. The cooperation between my R&D teams and those of the Alliance was agreed on the condition that while I would be provided with a somewhat downgraded version of the technology that the Alliance would use for distribution among the general populace, I would provide additional funds for the R&D teams of the Alliance that would work together with mine. When I told them that I was planning to bring an arms company into my portfolio and asked for the same arrangement as for the starships, I could swear that Admiral Wright was holding himself from kissing me. At least I got a new friend. Some more suggestions and ideas were thrown around, some dismissed and others would be implemented or shelved for later. They even gave me a nice title to the position I now had, head of the Committee for Economical and Industrial Relations of the Alliance. I would be responsible for all trade deals that the Alliance would make, except those that dealt with the fields in which I had companies. Those would be decided by a panel independent from me. I would still check the contracts and give advice, but I had no part in the decision, theoretically. I probably could still influence them. After all, I represent my own companies and try to make a deal, but officially I had no say in them. After the meeting ended, I made my way down to the landing pad on my own, the others going back to their own work. When Janet saw me exiting the building with a smile on my face, she knew that it went well and started to make preparations to get us back to London. Entering the passenger section of my shuttle, I decided to drink a glass of the whiskey that I only drank when a business deal went more than just well. I let myself fall into one of the comfortable chairs that adorned the passenger cabin and relaxed. The first step was done, and it was now time to prepare for the time when humanity would want to play with the big kids in the galaxy.